Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures, the solo actual play podcast where stories are told at the speed of dice. With me, Steve Morrison, your game master and solo player. Now come on, let's grab the dice and see where our story goes. Welcome back for Chapter 19 of Book 1, Meridian. Last time, the Howlin' Wolf arrives at Craius, but there's a storm forming as the ship descends through the atmosphere. Ayati shows off her superior piloting skills by guiding the wolf through buffeting winds to the starport platform connected to Creusis, the capital city of Craius. Because of the tainted atmosphere, the starport and the city are both housed inside two massive domes. Once they've landed, Einar heads to the Ministry of Trade to gain the permissions necessary to sell his cargo on planet, as well as find more cargo to transport. He waits for a while at the ministry before finally receiving an appointment with an assistant deputy undersecretary. They negotiate rates, and Einar isn't able to get a fully favorable rate, but he still clears a decent amount on the cargo. He finds cargo to transport to Ekelon, the next stop on their route back, and he makes arrangements to load it up. Back on the Wolf, Sejana spends the afternoon searching for contracts. She makes contact with a bonded broker who offers her 3 contracts. She takes one of them, a contract for a merchant who had 3 crates stolen. Having signed for the contract, she leaves the Wolf to begin her investigation. Sejana Lushale makes her way across the starport on a small hover skiff driven by a native Creusian. The being has gray-blue skin and webbed appendages that hover over the haptic controls. A breathing apparatus that appears to circulate water through it is attached to their long, sinewy face. The Creusian makes no attempt at conversation, which is fine by Sejana, who is far too busy pulling information on K. Murad to be bothered by inane chatter. How much info is publicly available about Murad? I think it makes sense that she would know his name and planet of origin, but is there more information to be gleaned? Let's roll a computer's check and see what Sejana can pull up. Our liar has a total bonus of +3 for computers, and I think I'm going to set this target number at around 10. So let's go ahead and roll it and see what we get. 10. All right. So that's a success with 0 effect, meaning she gets a little more info than just the basics, but it's not really a clear picture of what's going on. So I'm going to roll on the action and theme to give me an idea of what's lurking beneath the surface. I've got 64 and 87. That's manipulate survival. That's interesting. What info has she discovered that indicates he's manipulating survival? His stolen cargo involves oxygen heterocyclics that are involved in research of a treatment for exposure to Creusis' toxic atmosphere, so maybe it has something to do with that. I've got a few ideas, but they're not really fully formed yet, so I'm going to defer those to later once the situation is a little more clearly defined. In the meantime, Sejana finds the following information. K. Murad is a merchant trader who declares Tempora Hasta as his base of operations. He flies aboard the back to the Book of Random Tables, Science Fiction 266, the Ottawa Fafine, and he arrived on Craius the day before the Wolf. Sejana notes his planet of origin as Tempora Hasta, which is another world with a toxic atmosphere that houses a number of domed cities, all controlled and operated by different corporations. If Murad works for one specific corporation, that could present an interesting lead, but beyond that, she finds public records of the Ottawa Fafine visiting Creusis every few months for the last several years. The skiff crosses the starport, swerving around pedestrians and hopping over open landing pads. Let's make a quick recon check to see what our liar notices on the dock. Target number of 8. She's got a +3 on this roll. 7. That is a failure, but only by 1. Her eyes flick between her cue as she pulls data on Murad and the docks around her. Sejana estimates there are about a third of the platforms occupied, and Krais's entire starport is around a third of the size of one section of the Heraklion Interstellar starport. Most of the vessels look like trade ships, which makes sense. Krais is out of the way and not as advanced as other worlds in the Reaches, but there are a few exports that do bring in some money to the planet, including a type of deep ocean coral that, when fused with deuteronium, makes a beautifully pearlescent material that was highly sought after by the imperial aristocracy. What she doesn't see, perhaps because of happenstance or her driver's intentional course changes, is the group of Krayusian natives opening a small hole in the side wall of the starport's dome before diving into the depths below. There are a number of these portals around the exterior wall of the dome, but they only become obvious when opened. They arrive at the docking platform housing Atua Fafine, and Sejana is impressed by the size of the ship, which is easily twice that of the Wolf. It has the standard trader fuselage, but there are 2 additional cargo bays that have been added to the top of the ship, with an additional pair of engines and double the number of thrusters. Looking at it, Sejana admires the pilot who could fly that thing in Atmo. Once the skiff comes to a halt, Sejana disembarks and transfers the requisite rue to the driver. Without a word, the skiff whirs off in search of another passenger. Turning back to the ship, she approaches the entry port and taps the comm. Atua Fafine, this is Self. What can I do for you? I'd like to speak with K. Murad. I'm a licensed independent recovery specialist who has taken on his contract. Oh, do you have identification? Sal replies. Of course. Sejana Lushale, transmitting my ident now with a copy of the signed contract through a bonded broker. Sejana swipes her cue next to the comm panel and it chirps in response. Got it. All right, I'll pass this on to Kay. Please hold. The comm line goes dead. Sejana folds her arms and leans against the side of the ship. Waiting is just part of the game. Fortunately, it's only a few minutes before the access hatch snaps open and a human man in his late 80s stands in the entry. He looks as though he's recently started some of the anti-aging treatments available, as his deeply tanned skin is a juxtaposition of wrinkles and smooth freshness. He eyes Sejana for a minute. You're the liar, Lushale? Sejana nods. I've accepted the contract to recover your stolen goods. I was hoping to ask you some questions before I get started. Murad chews on his lips for a few seconds before turning and retreating down the hallway of his ship. Come on, we'll talk in the common room. Sejana follows him through the passages into a wide-open common area. There are a pair of Lupanians in the corner, throwing dice that look carved from bones. They don't even look up when she enters the room, though she sees their snouts twitch as they catch her scent. If she had to guess, she'd call them brothers, thanks to the same dark red patch on their muzzles. She also picks up the distinct bulge of weapons under their coats, and they definitely look like they've seen a scrap or two. Murad moves to a table and sits, gesturing for Sejana to take a seat. She opts for a different seat at the table, where she's better able to keep an eye on the 2 dicing in the corner. Murad catches her glance at them and shrugs. You don't need to worry about the twins. They're protection for the ship. Sejana ignores his comment, remembering the number of times she's needed to worry about unknowns at a meeting like this. Mix Murad, just a few questions. The cargo that was taken, how many containers, when and where were they taken? And did you capture any surveillance footage? Murad frowns. There are 3 crates about yay big. He gestures to represent a box about 1 meter wide and 2 meters tall. As for where and when, they were on the dock waiting to be picked up by the buyer. We move a lot of cargo, so there are always people coming and going. Did you see when the crates were taken? Let's pause for a minute and ask the Oracle an important question. Is there surveillance on the docks? I think it's likely. If this was a major port, I wouldn't even roll. But because this is a C-class port, I think there's a chance that the answer is no. Not a good chance, but a chance nonetheless. So let's roll it up and we'll say 75 or less is a yes. 25. Okay, so there is surveillance on the starport. That leads us to a second question. Was there an angle on that particular spot where the cargo was located? Here I'm going to call it 50-50. 50 or less will be a yes. 45. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Third question. Did something happen to the surveillance to obscure the moment of the theft? I think I'll keep it at 50-50. 54 is a no. Interesting. Okay, so the surveillance captured the theft. What exactly did the surveillance see? I'm thinking it is action and theme time. 81 and 41. Reveal hate. Okay. Whose hate is revealed? I still got a couple ideas brewing, but let's roll a first look on the character oracle in the Starforged reference guide. Maybe that'll give me a more firm direction of where things might be going. 92, well equipped. Okay, that gives me an idea. Let's envision the rest of this conversation and see what happens. Murad shifts in his seat and pulls out a small cylindrical device, sucking on it for a long moment before expelling vapor from his mouth. Yeah, I know exactly when it was taken, but the who is the real problem. The vid feed was corrupted? No, well, sort of. The feed was fine, but the image of who took the crates is challenging to parse. He pulls up his queue and opens a file, sending it to her. As soon as I noticed it was missing, I contacted Starport Security. They sent me this video file and said there wasn't much they could do with it. Sejana opens her queue and sees a vid of the starport pad outside the Ottawa Fafine, where the contents of the ship have been stacked. There's a bustle of transport drones approaching, picking up cargo pods and lifting off with them. She spots Murad and a few deckhands directing the traffic. The twin Lupanians are leaning against the ship looking bored. Through the bustle, a figure approaches from the left-hand view with a small drift cart. With a blink command to her neural interface, Sejana zooms the video in on the figure. It looks almost like a shadow that jitters and leaps across the screen. At random intervals, it looks like ghostly images erupting from the figure and dissipating into the air. Whoever it was walks to where the crates are stacked, loads them onto a drift cart, and walks away out of view. Sejana zooms it back out and watches it through again, this time looking at what was going on around the port. Let's go ahead and make another recon check to see what she notices. This one's going to be very difficult, so we're going to put it at a target number of 12 because it's a vid and it's harder to pick out some of those fine details. She does take her time, though, watching it through a number of times while Murad waits, so that gives her a +2 on top of her +3 for the skill. +5 on the roll. Here we go. Whoa, 16 total. Success with 4 effect. Her extra attention to the vid pays off as she sees exactly what she doesn't want to see. The twin Lupanians look directly at the figure as it is loading the crates, and they do nothing. Eventually, she swipes the video away, drops her hands into her lap, and looks at Murad, keeping the twins in her periphery. She can't tell if they're paying attention, but she assumes they are. What a strange thing, Murad says. Starport Security couldn't explain to me what we saw. Do you have any theories? She says. Let me think. She surreptitiously turns a dial on her gauntlet. Let's roll for stealth. I think she only needs to beat a TN of 6 because the table is acting as cover. It's +2 on this. 9, all right. She successfully turns the dial and aligns the gauntlet with the ambient void leaking through a hair fracture in reality just outside the ship. Pulling on that power, she focuses on the twins and attempts to read their surface thoughts. So this is going to be an average telepathy check, meaning she's got to beat an 8. Her telepathy talent is a +3 currently, so let's see what happens. She taps into the void and we get a 9 total. So that's a success with 1 effect, and she has to spend 2 psi points to use that power. All right, that's going to reduce her psi of 12 down to 10. We'll see if that comes up again as we continue. All right, effect equals clarity in this. So she detects some thoughts, but they aren't that clear. They are definitely listening to the conversation intently. One twin feels smug, while there's a tinge of guilt in the other's mind. The most concrete feeling she gets from both of them is that they don't want her to find something out. It's not clear what from their thoughts, but she can easily fill in the gaps. It's a stealth suit, Sejana says finally. I've seen them before. They output a low-level interference, not enough to set off any alarms or detectors, but it casts ghost images when caught on vid. Works better on actual eyes, making the space seem uninteresting and encouraging your visual receptors to look elsewhere. I'm not surprised Starport Security didn't know what it was. A suit like this is worth a lot of money. Whoever used it to steal your crates was able to walk up to them without anyone seeing, which probably means it wasn't an inside job. She feels the twins both relax. Also means it'll be more difficult to track, but the suit itself might be a lead. I'll do some digging and see what I can come up with. So, you think you can find my crates? Murad looks relieved. Sejana shrugs. Hard to say. There have been 4 departures since yesterday, according to the Starport reports. They could have been on any of those. Security searched all ships that have departed, Murad says. Plus, I know all the ships that departed. They're on the same route that I am, and we all spend time together in port. They wouldn't have stolen from me. You're more likely to be robbed by a rival than some random thug in a starport, Sejana says. And whoever did this would need the Rue to pay for one of those suits, or the Rue to pay a professional who already owns a stealth suit. Either way, this job wasn't cheap. But it's also likely someone stole it to sell to a buyer on planet, in which case the merchandise is most likely still here somewhere. They most likely won't try to turn around and sell it immediately, otherwise that could arouse suspicion. Either way, I'll do my best to find them. She turns with barely a look at the Lupanians, who continue their game in the corner, and they are fully relaxed now. Leaving the common area behind, she exits the ship and walks around the cargo loading platform, noting all the sight lines, including where the Lupanians were in relation to the cargo. Once she was satisfied she had that mentally locked in, Sejana sets off in the direction the figure had left the frame. Sometimes the most obvious answer is the easiest. She walks for a few minutes before realizing there are only 2 platforms between Ottawa Fafine and the dome wall. One platform is empty and the other is occupied by a ship that landed this morning. Checking the starport records, the empty platform was also empty yesterday as well, as was the one now occupied. She looks around and there are panels on the floor that open and move for repair techs to get under ships. So she opens up a comm channel and calls Starport Security. She explains her contract and inquires if there is any surveillance on this section of the starport. The officer assigned to the case is reluctant to share information during an active investigation, but Sejana quotes a few regulations that strongly encourage local law enforcement to cooperate with liars. Of course, Sejana doesn't have any intention of reminding him that the Imperial structures are gone, and unless someone in his own government decides to prosecute him, there's really no danger to him in refusing her request. Fortunately, he's either too overworked to care or genuinely believes in the system, but he transmits over the rest of the security footage. A quick review of which shows the figure walking past both empty platforms and out of frame into a blind spot along the dome's wall. Proceeding to that spot, Sejana pulls a scanner up on her queue and begins sweeping the area looking for any inconsistencies or hidden panels. Time to roll some more dice. If she was just looking around, I'd give her another recon roll, but since she's specifically scanning, we're going to use electronics sensors. She doesn't have sensors, but she has the basic electronics skill. So this will only be a +2 on the roll from her intellect versus a target number of 10. There is definitely something to find here, but it's not going to be easy. That is 12 total with the dice. Sejana looks at her scanner for the third time, verifying the results. There's a hidden panel, but not where she expects. It's in the wall of the dome. With sudden realization, she understands that it's an airlock, similar to the one they flew in early today. But it's here at ground level, and it's in a camera blind spot. This is how the thief removed the crates from the starport without being seen. And if that's what they did with them, then most likely they're still on the planet. Searching around, Sejana finds what looks like a biometric port. Scanning it, she detects native Creusian DNA. It would almost make sense for a Creusian to be able to use this port as access to the sea. Maybe there are more airlocks around the port. Maybe this isn't a special smuggler's tunnel. It was just used as one. Because she finds it hard to believe that Creusians could afford to purchase or develop a stealth suit. It was fairly limited tech 7 years ago when she was still with ISS. It also indicates that whoever the thief was either has help from an indigenous source or is Creusian themselves. That might narrow things down for her investigation. She can't really follow any more leads from here, so she heads back toward the Howlin' Wolf as night is beginning to settle over Creusis. As she's approaching the wolf, she finds Ludin sitting outside, knees curled up under his chin, staring at the dome and the rain pelting it. He looks at her as she's approaching and says, "There's food in the galley. The captain insisted on saving some for you." Sejana pauses and looks at the dome. "You're from Strides, right?" "Yeah," Ludin replies, going back to looking at the rain. "Quite a different world from what you're used to." "It's why I wanted to leave, to see more of the universe." Sejana chuckles. "Careful. See enough of the universe and it'll become routine. I barely even noticed the dome today because I've already been in dozens of cities like this one." Ludin shakes his head. "The grandeur of the universe can never be reduced." And this might be a good opportunity for Ludin to roll his first check, a deception check, because, lest we forget, he is lying about who he is and why he wanted to go to Cassida. We don't know who he's working for yet, but this is an opportunity for Sejana to get a vibe off him, and because of that, it'll be an opposed roll. Ludin has a +2 on his deception check. I'm also going to give him a boon die, because he's already passed muster once before on their initial meeting. So I'll roll 3d6, take the 2 highest, plus my dice modifier, but first I'll generate a target number with Sejana's +3 in recon. Oh, 12 total. That is bad news for Ludin. He's got to roll at least a 10 on the dice to equal her recon check. Here's the roll. 2 2s and a 5 for 9 total with the dice modifier. It's bad news for Ludin. Sejana studies him for a long moment as something tickles the back of her brain. She could swear she's heard that statement before, but she can't quite place it. She says, "That almost sounds religious." Ludin clears his throat and shrugs. It's something I heard from a traveler coming through Strides." Sejana fixes him with a speculative look, then says, "Well, I have work to do. Good night." And she walks up the ramp into the wolf. Thanks for listening to Errant Adventures. If you enjoyed the show, please spread the word. And if you want to support the show directly, leave me a review or support me on Patreon at patreon.com/errantadventures. You can also buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com/errantadventures. If you want to interact with me, my handle on all the socials is @errantsolopod, or you can email me at errantsolopod@gmail.com. I also post short fiction and campaign-related materials on my website, errantadventurespod.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the deep, liars.